Hi guys, good afternoon. Today, Mylique is going to be giving you a presentation on wrestling. Mylique has been a big wrestling fan since he was a kid, and he knows the ins and outs about it. And today he's going to teach you a little bit about the sport. So, give me your attention.
Alright, so this quote right here is basically saying that throughout your life, people are going to tell you the way they want you to live your life, but you shouldn't listen to what they're saying. Live your life your own way. And the man who said this quote was this guy right here, Shawn Michaels. Does the name sound familiar to anybody?
Mike right here
Yeah.
in front.
Yeah, do you know what he is? No, he's a wrestler. Alright, so he's a professional wrestler. He retired about 2 years ago, and he's one of my favorites because he was good at what he does, and he has a really inspirational story that I'm going to share with you today. And yeah, this is about the life and career of Shawn Michaels. And in this presentation, I'll talk about his early life, just a brief overview about before he became a wrestler, his career highlights, just some key moments that you need to know about what he's done for the sport of wrestling, his battle with drugs, and then how he came back from that, his comeback to wrestling, and then what he did after he retired. So, he was born Michael Shawn Hickenbottom, July 22nd, 1965, in Chandler, Arizona. So he's about 47 today. He has 2 older brothers and 1 older sister. His dad was in the military, so they moved around from place to place until they finally settled in Randolph, Texas, where Shawn went to Randolph High School. He was a football player, but his heart was in wrestling. So when he went to Southwest Texas State University, he dropped out because he didn't want to go to college, he wanted to wrestle. And this quote right here at the bottom, that's like his career motto. It's what he went by throughout his life as a wrestler. He did things that nobody else was doing. He went over the top, beyond the call of duty, just to get the people a show. Like, nobody else would come down from the ceiling, but he took it upon himself because he wanted people to remember him. And so his wrestling career began as a tag team called the Midnight Rockers. He's on the right, and the guy on the left is called Marty Jannetty. He began in October 1984, making him 19 years old. And inside the ring they were great, but outside they were all about the party life. They would get into bar fights, they would use drugs, and his tag team was like the beginning of his drug use. And the quote right here talks about how he even contemplated suicide at one point because of the drugs would get into him. Things weren't going the way he wanted to go, and he just thought of ending it at one point, but he didn't. And the team eventually broke up because Shawn wanted to go his own way, and so Shawn went on to the big things. Marty Jannetty just fell off, he disappeared after that. And so he adopted this persona called the Heartbreak Kid. He was in love with himself. He adopted this pretty boy persona. Like, you see him wearing the long earrings, the glittery jacket. He would kiss himself in the mirror. He was just, like, he felt he was better than everybody else. And even though he was playing a character, it was part of himself as too. You listen to the way people would talk about him in interviews. They would talk about how his ego was so big that he didn't think he should lose to anybody. He thought he was the best there is. And he was really hard to work with, as the quote up there says. And just like when he was in the tag team, he would get into these bar fights. He would just use drugs. He would come to work under the influence. And they said that he even lied about how serious his knee injury was just so he wouldn't lose to a guy called Bret Hart. And Bret Hart comes up in a big way later on in this. He eventually formed a group called D-Generation X, and it was like, even though he was an adult, this group was just, they acted like a bunch of college kids. They would pull pranks, they would tell the boss to suck it. They would just pull all these types of pranks, and he was really acting immature, you could say. But people loved it because they loved Shawn, but behind the scenes, they didn't really know how he was and how he treated other people. And that's Bret Hart over there. And if there's one thing you should know about Shawn Michaels in his career, it's the Montreal School Job. You know, they say wrestling is fake because you know they know who's gonna win before the match starts. But for this, Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon, the owner of the company, they rigged the match against Bret Hart because Bret Hart didn't want to lose in Canada, his home country, to Shawn Michaels because he felt Shawn Michaels didn't respect him enough. And that was true. Shawn Michaels felt that he was better than the rest. He felt that Bret Hart should just lie down for him, and Bret Hart didn't want to do that. So it was kind of that clash of egos, and eventually they rigged the match against Bret Hart. Bret Hart left the company, and in the 90s, if you were Canadian and you were a wrestling fan, Bret Hart was the idol because he represented a country. And to see him go down like that, it made Shawn Michaels public enemy #1. And basically, anytime Shawn Michaels went to Canada, they wanted him dead. And in 1998, he injured his back. And the quote down here is talking about how he wrestled with a lot of aches and sores, but that back injury was like the icing on the cake. That's what put him out of business and almost ended his career. And while he was away, his drug habits only got worse because he was feeling sorry for himself. And you know, his career was over. He wanted to be a wrestler since he was 12, and it ended just like that. And he didn't know what to do with himself. And while he was out injured, he met this woman, Rebecca, and after 2 months, they went to Las Vegas and got married. Around that time, she found out she was 6 months pregnant. And you know, you think that with his first son on the way, he would change his habits, change his ways, but it wasn't until his son was 2 years old that he finally kicked his habits. And this video tells the story about how he changed his ways.
Made the promise to clean up. I didn't. Cameron was approaching his second birthday.
Shawn had fallen asleep on the
Can you
couch.
guys hear it?
Some-induced sleep.
Yeah, great.
I made the promise to clean up. I didn't. Cameron was approaching his second birthday.
Shawn had fallen asleep on the couch. It was, some-induced sleep with our son on the couch. And our son was just climbing all over him and saying, "Daddy's asleep."
You know, it was just the realization that now he was getting old enough to see, from an outside.
He stumbled into Cameron's room to read the bedtime story, and it was, I think, the saddest thing I'd ever seen. He was trying so hard to be a good dad, and he was still struggling with himself.
It just became very apparent to me that if I wasn't careful, I was going to ruin him. And that wasn't anything he asked for.
Shawn woke up in the middle of the night and he said, "Where are all the cookies?" And I said, "Baby, you ate them. You and Cameron ate them." And he didn't remember. And for some reason, that did it for him.
I remember the Bible study and the gentleman asked me, "Would you like to have Jesus Christ in your life?" And I said, "You know something? Yeah, man." It was like, just like this day, just been knocked down. In one moment, everything made sense. I knew who I was, and I got it. And all of a sudden, the light went on, and nothing really mattered. Now, except, us and him, as long as we got that, and we were good.
Alright, so while he was out, he found God, and it kind of changed who he was as a person and how he acted when he came back to wrestling. He was much more humble. Unlike the situation with Bret Hart, he wasn't afraid of losing anything. He was much more willing to make other guys look good. And as you can see here, he adopted that he would pray before his matches. He had the cross on his vest, and it just showed how he was a different man after he found God and changed the way he lived his life. And he came back after getting injured in 1998. He came back to wrestling in 2002. He retired in 2010. And the quote there in the middle talks about how he realized how his kids will be watching him one day. Other people's kids are watching him, and he really became a role model, accepted his role as a role model. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2011, and one of the biggest things that came from his change was the fact that he was able to reconcile with Bret Hart. They have been spoken since that incident, but then eventually they're able to let bygones be bygones, and they meet up. And then after he retired, he shows up for wrestling every now and then, but now he's more focused on being a family man. Along with his son, he has a daughter now, but even though he's not wrestling, he has a show called Macmillan River Adventures. It's a hunting show. I guess it's a hunting show. I don't really watch it. That's really not for me. So I look back. We talked about his early life, how his love for wrestling led to him dropping out of high school. We talked about his career, just key moments in it. His battle with drugs, how it led to his downfall, and him thinking of committing suicide at one point, and how he found God, was reborn, came back as a new man. His comeback, how he didn't really miss a beat from 2000 to 2010, and then his retirement, how he just was inducted to the Hall of Fame. He's doing his own show now. Yeah. So these are my words excited. So I hope this speech helped you learn about this guy, helped you know more about than you did 5 or so minutes ago. So, thank you.